silkanotana tineyani tiwi hitaniyanulena kunai. That is a song that comes from the Basket Women Society. The older people, the grandmothers, they believed that all the baskets had a song and a story to tell. The baskets were very important in the Native American culture. All our stories and songs and our feelings about our people, the people that we loved, were woven into the baskets. By looking at some of the designs in the baskets, sometimes you can feel those people, those ancestors from way back.
For thousands of years, baskets were the most useful of all possessions, for in them the native woman carried her burdens, rocked her baby, and collected, cooked, and stored her food. Woven materials were used for clothing, for shelter, for mats to sleep on, for fishing nets and cooking utensils. Baskets were also part of a rich ceremonial life, given to guests at potlatches and exchanged at weddings and life cycle ceremonies.
In the latter half of the 19th century, basketry took on a new function for the native people. It became a means of economic survival. Sadly, by this time, the old way of living was no longer possible. Epidemics of introduced diseases, warfare, and relocation had left the Indian population a fraction of its former size. Westward expansion and settlement drastically altered native economy and lifestyle. Ironically, the Euro-American became fascinated with the Indian. Stimulated by the arts and crafts movement and promotion from traders and travel companies, a hunger grew to collect that which was made by the Indian. Baskets which were made to be used and traded for their contents in a barter society were now sold empty as art for cash. Although Indian women continued to make baskets for their families, a majority were made to be sold to collectors.
Many of the fine Northwest Coast baskets and collections today were made for sale at this time. These are the baskets we will be looking at. Baskets made for the most part between 1860 and 1930 during a renaissance of basket making. Baskets which interweave the history, imagination, and heart of the people who made them. We begin our journey in the north along the Alaskan coast, where the great variety of landscapes and climates are reflected in the diversity of the basket-making traditions. We'll see baskets made of ryegrasses from the barren, storm-swept Aleutian Islands, to those made of spruce root and cedar bark in southeastern Alaska, where the coastal mountains are blanketed with dense forests. We'll see coiled beach grass baskets from the Kuskokwim River area, as well as baskets created from the baleen of toothless whales at Point Barrow, Alaska.
Aleutian basketry, considered the finest twine basketry in the world, comes from the bleakest area in this country. That is the Aleutian Island chain, which abounds 900 miles west of the Alaskan Peninsula. There are 69 islands, but only 4 inhabited as we speak. And of those 4, only 3 major basketry traditions. There's the Attu, which is the most famous, the Atka, and the Unalaska, which is a little coarser weave. The finest weaving traditions developed at the outmost island on Attu. This particular basket is an Attu. We know by the knob, We know by the curvature from the bottom of the basket onto the sides of the body, and we know by the fineness of weave. We also know by the materials used. They used to judge these baskets by how many stitches to the square inch. This particular basket has about 1,500 stitches to the square inch, which is almost unheard of. These are silk threads that are worked into the basket as the basket is being woven. Looking into the basket, you see that this woman has woven an open work start. We also see the leftover silk threads from the designs on the outside of the basket. You do not see the complete design. This is called false embroidery. The decoration is woven along with the foundation. It all happens at the same time. The silk and worsted materials used to decorate the baskets were brought to the islands by the Russians, who occupied the Aleutian chain between 1741 and 1850 while exploiting the rich sea mammal hunting grounds. These baskets commanded a high price at the time they were made. They were made to be sold. They were made as treasury baskets. They are the prized possessions of collectors and museums. This particular basket is a rattletop, a rarity. It was made on the island of Vatou, and it is a gem. Yesterday of 100 years ago, a basket like this could command the price of $100. A man's salary at that time was probably $5 a week. Today, a basket like this would command thousands of dollars. The lid was made to match the body of the basket. You see that this woman has done the exact banding on her lid as matches the two accompanying bands on the basket. The knobs on these baskets are also completely decorated. These are usually woven with complementary colors, but they do not necessarily match the body of the basket. It is like one composition which rests on top of another. The more designs these illusion baskets have, the more desirable they become. The basket on the left with the fret pattern is such an example because it is completely embroidered. This basket is made to be used. It is a clam gathering basket. It is made from the same materials but woven with a heavier gauge of ryegrass, and it is an open weave to allow the water to pass through. Even though it is a work basket, it is interesting to note that decoration was still very important to the creative weaver.
In the Aleutian Islands, we see a classic pattern of native culture succumbing to the outside influences of occupation, disease, and war. The harsh rule of Russian occupation was followed by successive epidemics of introduced diseases. Caught between two powerful antagonists, the Aleutian culture was torn apart by the forces of World War II. At the outbreak of the war, the Japanese occupied Attu Island and moved the native people to Japan, where they were put to work in coal mines. The United States evacuated all other Aleutian people to camps on the mainland, where many of the old and young did not survive due to inadequate living conditions. The Aleuts who returned home after the war found their communities destroyed, their boats gone, their livestock dead. Today, the few basket makers who are weaving are using a material called raffia, imported from Madagascar. The last basket woven on Attu Island was in 1941. The west coast of Alaska is a beautiful but challenging environment to live in. Through keen ingenuity and creativity, the Eskimo people successfully meet this challenge. Coiled beach grass baskets in the form of a ginger jar are the most familiar expressions of their basketry tradition, which is very much alive today.
The earliest coil baskets were mostly undecorated. The adaptable Eskimo weavers later added beads and colored grasses, animal skin, seal gut, and ivory carvings to sell to a growing market. A manager from Lohman Company encouraged ever finer coiling and provided a steady outlet for the baskets in the 1920s. Today, the beautifully coiled beach grass baskets from the Hooper Bay area are as fine as any made in the past. Coiling is a process that involves sewing or lacing together successive bands of coiled material. The weaver starts at the bottom and works her way up to the top. In my hand, we have a basket that is from the Kuskokwim River area of Alaska. Women wove these coiled baskets. A coiling starts from the bottom and works its way up till the very top. And then lids were usually added to these baskets. This basket is done with aniline dye, and the woman has made a special attempt to completely match the lid to her body of the basket.
The North Coast Eskimos centered their lives and communities around the migration of the bowhead whale. The products of whaling were of considerable economic importance to these people, especially baleen, which was selling for as high as $5 a pound on the world market in the 1880s. However, between 1908 and 1914, whaling came to a standstill. The traditional use of baleen for such items as corset and umbrella stays had been usurped by plastic.
As the story goes, an American whaler and trader in the Point Barrow region asked King Uktuk, a Point Barrow Eskimo, to create a basket from stockpile baleen. This is the fibrous material forming the sieve-like mouth of plankton-eating whales. Baskets were being sold elsewhere. Why not in Alaska? And what better material to work with than that which was most familiar? King Uktuk learned to weave the baleen and in turn taught others, thus creating a new tradition of basket making. Some feel these baskets were made to house the ivory finial on top, that the baleen basket is a pedestal for the ivory. We see a little snow goose on top of this basket made by King Uktuk. The white around this basket is white baleen. There is also an ivory start on the bottom of the basket where we see the property mark or maker's mark. The start of the bottom and lid are a carved and perforated piece of ivory. These are stitch-wrapped coil baskets of single rod construction. Marvin Peters was known for his self-stitch. He has placed a polar bear on top of this basket. If we look inside this basket, we will see that Marvin Peters has signed his name. This basket was made in 1937 by MSP, Marvin S. Peters. And if we look at the bottom of the basket, we see that this was his 72nd basket. Marvin wove for a long time. He became what is known as a master weaver. Here we see a beautiful example of a light-colored baleen basket made by Andrew O'Nagan. This is one of his earlier baskets, and it has an especially pleasing ivory finial. Baleen baskets are atypical for a few reasons. They were made by men, they were made in response to a denigrated economy, and they were not made with botanical materials. They were made instead with zoomorphic materials, zoomorphic meaning coming from the animal. These baskets are being made today and are highly sought after.
The Tlinkits live along the coast and steep-sided islands of southeastern Alaska, which are heavily forested with cedar and spruce trees. Largest of the Northwest Coast tribes, their territory extends along the jagged coast for 500 miles, from Yucatac Bay to Dixon Entrance, encompassing 14 villages. Each of these villages is known for fine basketry, the most famous being the Yucatac. For the Tlinkits, basketry was a gift from their creator, Raven, and therefore important in every aspect of life, from functional to ceremonial. They wove twined spruce root baskets with beach grass decorations, as well as exquisite robes and blankets of spun cedar bark and mountain goat wool. The early explorers loved the Tlingit baskets, as did the collectors. Beginning in the 1870s, Tlingit women began weaving smaller baskets for the tourist trade. Sitka, Alaska became a favorite collecting site and steamship stop. Here we see women selling their baskets on the wharf at Sitka in 1904.
This is the largest, most beautiful example of a Tlingit spruce root basket I have ever seen. One that is made with geometric motif, one that is made in the traditional way with the bear grass, the dyed bear grass, and done traditionally with what is known as false embroidery. You do not see the weaving on the inside of any Tlingit basket. These baskets were used in the potlatch ceremony, maybe to hold a feast, maybe to hold a great food dish that was served to all the invited guests. It is a prime example, a traditional example of Tlingit basketry. We have what is known as the two matching bands in the body of the basket and a tying band in the middle of the basket. Appropriate margin on the top of the basket should match or be a little bit smaller than the margin on the bottom of the basket. And may I say that if you do not have a margin on the top of your basket, chances are the basket had broken somewhere along the line and someone has cut off that basket. So be very wary of equal margins on a Tlingit basket and a nice binding off rim. These Tlingit baskets are illustrative of the Tlingit berry basket. We have two different sizes. We have the size that would have been probably carried on the woman's back or maybe in the front of her, but holding a smaller one to put her berries in. These baskets are made with aniline dyes, and they also have two very distinguishing factors. You remember we said about the basket with the three design fields? We have it here with the middle band being the tying band. And on the other basket we have just two bands. Fine. She has used something else to tie her design together. You notice the little stitching in the basket itself. It's a raised stitch. It is known sometimes as the Chilkat self-stitch. She is using that as her decorative pattern. And on the little basket in the foreground, we have one of the finest little baskets, probably made for sale, and certainly one of the finer woven ones, showing the three design bands and the extra inclusion of the Chilkat self-stitch, which adds much monetary value to a good Tlingit basket. If we look on the inside of this basket, we will see that the woman, before beginning her basket, has dyed some of her spruce root. It has done a little extra decoration to the inside of the basket, but mainly it has added her design element on the outer side of her basket, or her composition. These are Tlingit rattle tops. Rattles were very important to the Tlingit people. The men made the wooden rattles and the women wove the basketry or botanical rattles. They are made of spruce root, maidenhair fern, bear grass, and dyed bear grass. We see three different basketry styles here. We see the oldest geometric design. We see a little newer geometric design and two zoomorphic designs in the foreground. This basket was woven by a very creative woman. As you see in the body of her basket, she has included the whale design holding the seal, and on this side the whale catching the fish. And to make matters even more creative, she has included fish on the upper lid. And look what she did to the knob. She has included tiny little fish to conclude her composition. On this basket we have the snow goose and Sitka rose design. So we know that this basket was made in Sitka, Alaska. This is a traditionally designed rattle top, made with a single band which matches the top of the basket. As an extra feature, this basket has the fern frond design, which envelops the chamber that holds the buckshot. In earlier days, these were made with goose pebbles or taramon seeds. These were made for very important people for gifts. They were made for potlatches. They were made to sell to the Victorian ladies who used to come up to Alaska to buy them.
Basket makers in each area of the Northwest coast produced baskets unique to their region. However, we see overlapping characteristics in the basket-making traditions of neighboring tribes. This is a result of intertribal marriages, trade, visiting, and availability of materials. Haida and Tsimshian baskets are sometimes mistaken for Tlinkits, but we'll see some clear distinctions. The Haida people occupied the mountainous Queen Charlotte Islands, 50 miles off the rugged coast of British Columbia, and the southern portion of the Prince of Wales Island. Like their Tlingit neighbors, they excelled in twined spruce root basket making.
The long spruce roots are dug out of sandy soil, peeled, then split again and again until each strand is fine and even. Strands from the glossy outer surface of the root are used for the wefts, while those from the center of the root become the concealed warps. This is a traditional berry basket. The Haida decorated baskets like these by dyeing some of the weft strands before weaving them into simple bands around their baskets. These bands are typically black, green, or brown. This weaver has done a beautiful job. She has included the Chilkat self-stitch to make the upper part of her basket a little more decorative. A complex twining stitch reinforces the rim. The overall effect is simple and elegant. Although the classic Haida basket is beautifully woven, the early collectors preferred the more colorful Tlingit baskets decorated with false embroidery. Consequently, old Haida baskets are rare today because less of them were made. Here we see a Haida basket which is painted. Design was painted on after the spruce root basket was produced, usually by the weaver's husband or some other artist. The Haida are well known for their painted spruce root hats. Most tribes on the coast wore hats to protect them from the sun and rain, as well as plaited cedar bark capes. The Haida, as well as the Tlinkits and Tsimshian, wove plain and decorated conical spruce hats throughout the 19th century. The decorated hats were painted with crest or serpent designs and worn by high-ranking individuals at ceremonial occasions. Here we see an excellent example of a traditional plaited cedar bark mat. It was woven in the 19th century to be used by a Haida family who had intermarried with the Tsimshians. Many tribes throughout the Northwest coast wove these mats. They were used for sleeping, sitting, housing, and clothing. Plaiting is accomplished by passing the warp and weft over and under each other, creating a checkerboard pattern. The edges are split and twined to form the rim, which keeps it from unraveling.
The Tsimshian people were in frequent contact with the Haida and Tlingit as they lived along the coastal fjords and rivers leading to the interior and were heavily involved in trading. These baskets were made in the early 20th century in a village called Metlakatla, which was established by a missionary in the 1880s. The Tsimshian worked primarily with cedar root and bark. The bark is taken off the cedar tree in such a way as not to kill the tree. This is done in May or June while the sap is running. Only one strip is taken off any one living tree. After stripping the bark from the tree, the soft inner portion is peeled away from the outer layer and folded until needed.
Many times these baskets are often mistaken for Tlinkits because you could charge more for a Tlingit than you could for a basket that was not made with spruce root but was made with cedar bark. They were not known as the fine weavers like the Tlinkits, and they did very unusual things to their baskets, as you see in this basket. The woman has incorporated, using bear grass, the white material on top of the cedar bark, the word Alaska, which is very common on Tsimshian basketry. But then she has made this like a vase by pushing it in when it was wet and the form held. She also incorporated the zoomorphic motif of the butterfly. This added to the price of her basket because the Euro-American loved the zoomorphic motifs.
Dense cedar and spruce forests blanket the west shore of Vancouver Island and the northwest tip of the Olympic Peninsula, home to the Nootkan-speaking West Coast people. Intrepid whalers and sea gatherers, these people lived on the bays and inlets and mouths of rivers flowing near these forests. The bark from the cedar tree, along with bear grass and cattail, provided the material needed for weaving baskets, hats, robes, and mats. European explorers collected and illustrated finely woven cedar bark hats decorated with whales, fishermen, and canoes when they arrived on the coast in the 1780s. In the middle of the 19th century, the Makah and Nootka developed a wrapped twined cedar bark trinket basket with bear grass overlay, decorated with mariner scenes, a legacy of design from the whaler hats.
They wove these little baskets of bear grass. They were called treasury or gift baskets, and they have lids with a little cedar bark rim on there. They were little baskets, and they were easily carried back to one's hometown. Everyone had to get a memento from their visit to Canada or from the Olympic Peninsula area, their sister tribe, the Makahs. Oftentimes, in Seattle, you'd see 3 generations of people sitting on the corners outside big department stores like the Hudson Bay Company, selling their wares. This particular basket was made by a woman who died a few years ago, considered one of the finest of the contemporary Nootkan weavers. Her name was Mary Moses. But you see, she has used, on her bottom, she has used very, very little cedar bark, if at all. If we look at a Makah basket, we will see that she has used a lot of cedar bark in the foundation of her basket. That is one way to tell these two tribes apart. Now at the bottom of this basket, there are some little pinholes. Many of these baskets, in order to make them as tight as they could, were made over a mold. And many of these molds were passed down from mother to daughter. The husband usually made the mold and gave it to his wife. Some were so ingenious that they were collapsible. They would collapse after the basket was made and the woman could pull her mold out of the basket. But that is why we see many baskets all of one size or form. This is particularly good. And if you think it was any easier to weave over a form than it was without the form, you are wrong. They were very difficult to produce, especially of this fineness. Do you remember when we were kids and we had mnemonics for studying for tests? Well, this is a basketry mnemonic. However, it was called a pattern basket. This basket was made by Mabel Taylor, and she lived on Vancouver Island. She put her whole design vocabulary on this basket, and then when she wove one of her little treasury baskets, she'd know approximately how many stitches made up each design. Everything is on this basket. The Nootka had a grass, which was known as swamp grass. It was a tri-cornered grass, very sturdy grass, and when they could trade with the Makah for their bear grass, they did so because it was easier to work with. Creative Makah and Nootkan basket weavers, now known as the West Coast people, developed their basket-making virtuosity to such an extent that they wove basketry over anything and everything. Eccentricities included antlers and Japanese fishing floats. More prevalent were basketry woven bottles and jars. This little gem was made by a Makah weaver. It has the little cedar bark start. But it was made by a woman who just wanted to prove how fine she could weave a basket. It is woven as finely as I've ever seen a Makah woven. And a basket like this, believe it or not, at the turn of the century might sell for 25 cents. And why? Because the person who bought it probably looked in some catalog and saw this little basket, according to size. If it was bigger, it might be 50 cents. But thousands of these sold in that price range. Today, a basket like this would be worth many $100s. This is a very unusual basket, It is commonly known as a medicine basket. When the lid of the basket is smaller than the body of the basket, it denotes a medicine basket. Baskets like this, though, may never have been used for medicine. They were probably made for the tourist who came as far away as New York and wanted to bring home a gem to brag to their friends about. Many times, travel companies would also put out their brochure, and they would say, "Is Alaska represented in your den?" Well, if it isn't, come and travel with us up to the wilds of Alaska, or to the wilds of, believe it or not, Seattle, which were not wild at all, and see the Indians in their natural habitat. However, very sadly, at this time the Indian was not in his natural habitat. They were sitting on these street corners and selling their wares.
We are now going up the Fraser River and its tributary, the Thompson, to look at a different type of basket, a hard basket, which is accomplished by a coiling technique. The usual material is split cedar root for the foundation of the coils and for the sewing strand, which laces the coils into a firm basket.
We are going to move into the interior of Canada a wee bit, into an area where there are three very, very close tribes. They are neighboring tribes. The first of these is the Thompson River, very prolific basket makers. As a matter of fact, they are one of the only tribes that is heavily weaving today. But this was woven around the turn of the century. It was woven in response to the cedar chest. And yes, this is a cedar chest, but it is a woven cedar chest. It is a basketry chest. People used to buy these cedar chests, put their dowries and their tablecloths, everything in these, and the moths would never get to them. They are hard baskets, as is anything made of cedar root. The red in this basket is cherry bark. The black is cedar root skin, and the white is bear grass. And we see on the rim this alternate banding here, which is the cedar root itself. It is the foundation over which we see beading technique. And if you notice on this, the beading, you see the cedar root and the cherry bark, which is not folded as in imbrication. It is laid over the stitching, and the stitching is laid over the cherry bark. However, in the body of this basket, we have the technique which is known as imbrication. It is a folding technique. It is used not only in Canada, but through Washington. The only area in the country where this technique is used. This is another Thompson River, and as you can see, it is not a traditional shape. This was woven to cater to the arts and crafts period, at the time when people wanted mementos to put on their dining room tables. What better thing than an Indian basket made with native materials, but simulating the vase. Another little basket, a little treasury basket, but with a handle, also made to sell to the tourists. Made of natural materials, made in the Thompson River area, very, very decorative with the little loops along the top. Let's go over the materials. The red in this area is cherry bark, the white is bear grass, the black is cedar root, and yes, the background is what? Cedar root. This is called a burden basket, but it's a very distinctive burden basket. We're going to go through the design on this basket. But before I do, I want to show you something that has been added. It is a tump line. This tump line would have been held along the forehead and the basket carried on one's back. If we look at the inside of this basket, we see the cedar root foundation. Materials haven't changed on the outside, but the design has changed. That is a very traditional design. Baskets of this kind, and in the two neighboring areas which we will get to, had a very distinctive motif. The upper 2/3 of the basket was covered with either beading or imbrication, as we see in this basket, and this is beading. And the lower third, they pick out a complementary design and do not imbricate or bead the complete bottom third of the basket. Now let's turn this basket around, and we can see what she did with the back of her basket. You notice that 3 of the sides were the same. The back, which is against the body, against the horse, is not seen, and it is something which is less decorative. Again, the same materials.
The Chilcotins are neighbors of the Thompson River people. They live between the Fraser River and the Cascade Mountains, and although they are an Athabascan people, we'll see some similarities in their basketry traditions with their Salish neighbors.
These people did something completely different with their burden baskets, and they are very desirable because these baskets are not woven today. This is a very old basket. This basket, it goes way back to 1860 to 70. It is woven in a distinctive manner, has a traditional form, and some diagnostic design features. One being the rim design, which is different from the body of the basket. The basket has elongated zoomorphic figures, which are very typical to this area only. Around the upper part of the basket and where the rim design ends and the body design begins is usually a reinforcing rod. This one is a willow rod, many times put on with willow or string or sinew, whatever. Later on, they used coat hangers, anything that stabilized the basket. This woman did something a lot different on the rim of her basket. She used bird quill stitches to bind off. The red is cherry bark, and the background is bear grass. And yes, the interior is cedar again. This is another cedar hard basket, one made to be used. One other distinctive feature about this basket, it is a basket with lower front and back than the sides. They dip a little bit, if you notice. This is a geometric Chilcotin. The woman has had a lot of fun with this basket. I feel that she wove this basket probably in the Art Deco period, because there is not a square inch that is left undecorated. She has used not cherry bark here. She has dyed her cedar root so that it shows even on the inside of the basket.
The third neighboring tribe on this western part of Canada, another Salish tribe, are the Lillooet people. The Lillooets wove many of the same forms using the same materials, but their weave is slightly different. It's a little more compact.
This is a suitcase. It was woven for the Euro-American traveler, and there would have been a handle right along here and connected in the back with wire, most probably from a coat hanger. It is, however, a cedar basket made from the same materials that the Lillooet, the Thompson River, and the Chilcotin wove with. Cherry bark, cedar root, and the white is the bear grass. Another artifact, piece of art from this particular Lillooet area is this little trunk or little purse. Now, a distinguishing factor that lets us know that this is a Lillooet rather than Thompson River is the little hump in the lid. If it was a Thompson River, it would have a flat lid. But this little protrusion in the lid lets us know it's from the Lillooet area. And we see that the decoration on the top is done in, yes, beading. The body of the basket is with a technique of imbrication, the folding in of the material before the stitch is closed. These are worn as purses, but they were called little trunks nonetheless. Here we have two other Lillooets, two lidded baskets, one with zoomorphic design using the very funny elongated legged ducks, or whatever we call them, chickens. No one has yet come up with a name for this animal. and the geometric covered basket. These are old baskets. They go back to 1880 to 1890. They were sold in stores, and they were sold to tourists to emulate that which the tourist had probably in their own home, a covered vase or covered bowl. This is another Lillooet. Now, does it look familiar to you? Did it look like the Thompson River that we showed earlier? Well, it looks very similar. The 2/3 of the basket on the top are completely covered with design. In this case, they are imbricated, and the bottom third complementary but not matching the upper part of the basket. She has used a beaded stitch for her lower third or less of the basket. Again, it is the inverted pyramid. Beautifully woven, as the Lillooet were known to do. Beautifully woven.
I was not a basket maker. I probably made the most unusual basket in the world. And if you looked at my basket, I guess you could call it modern art. It was very unusual looking. But my grandmother looked at the basket and she said, "It's all right. It's all right. You know, you're not a basket maker, but it's important for you to touch the materials of the basket, to feel the feelings of the baskets, because the baskets will talk to you."
Moving down to the Puget Sound in the northern part of what is now Washington State, we find the Coast Salish people. Ease of travel along extensive waterways, a temperate climate, and a wide variety of food sources attracted many different groups to the area. We will talk about a few. The Puget Sound home of the Coast Salish people is a very important area of basketry. Almost all known Northwest Coast basketry techniques were practiced here.
Baskets from the Puget Sound area, the coil baskets, as well as the twine, which we will see, had a particular rim which did not match the body of the basket. As we see, this one does not. These baskets were made to be cooked in usually. The larger the basket, of course, the more people it could feed. A basket like this could feed a lot of people, and they would cook in this basket and drop in hot rocks, stir real quickly so it did not burn the sides of the basket, and then everyone would eat from a basket like this. The materials on this basket are the hard basket materials. The cedar, which is the foundation, beargrass white, cedar root black, which has been dyed in an alkaline mud solution, and the red in this basket looks very much like cherry bark, which was usually not used other than in British Columbia, but they were close enough to trade for this material. And I believe that this is cherry bark. This is the mountain design, zigzag, and highly embellished with a negative on top of positive. A very desirable basket and in beautiful condition. This is a Snohomish basket. Now you might wonder what that pink is. Is that natural? It is not. It is aniline dyes. But the woman made this basket before the turn of the century. Aniline dyes were readily available in the Northwest by the 1870s. These are Nisqually baskets from the Puget Sound area. As you can see, they are both very distinctive in form. They have a squatty form rather than the tall, beautifully flaring sides of their neighbors. However, they are woven of the same materials, and they have the loops on the top. These loops were probably decorative. They were never made to be used because they are very fragile. They were made to be sold. They are woven of cedar, and of cedar root. The white is bear grass. And the red in this basket is cedar with an alder bark dye. Beautiful baskets, but of a different form. This is a mystery basket. It has all the right features, but we keep coming up with the wrong answer. The basket has the loops of a klickitat. It has the body of a klickitat. It has the weave of a klickitat. It even has the design of a klickitat. However, there's one feature that is not typical of klickitat basketry. It is the decorative rim along the border of this basket. It is not a feature of klickitat basketry. Also, the start of this basket is an elliptical start. It is an oval start, not a round start of the klickitat, and it also has beading on the bottom, which is so atypical of the klickitat area. In my opinion, this is from the Puget Sound area. It is the most beautifully woven basket that I have ever seen.
Not everyone was a skilled basket maker. At about 6 years of age, boys, as well as girls, would help their mother collect materials and even start to make baskets. But it wasn't until the girl entered her puberty that she took basket making in earnest. It was at this time that she would go through ritual fasting and then go out in search of her vision power, a quest to find out if she was one of the chosen few to become one of the expert basket weavers. If she found this to be her path, she apprenticed herself to a master basket maker and began the training necessary for her to develop her skill.
This is a twine basket and a flexible twine basket. This basket was woven of cattail, which is the inner part of this basket. It is woven of bear grass, which is the white, and it is of a flexible material with the loops added, probably for decoration later, but earlier on it was done for a purpose. Why? People would put their clothing in baskets like this, into the flexible baskets of this size, and what they would do is they would close the basket by getting something to whip the loops together so that the contents would not spill out. This is a Twana basket, referred to as a Skokomish basket. There were 9 subgroups of Twana, Skokomish being the one that the reservation was formed on. The diagnostic trait is this rim at the top of the basket, which encloses either zoomorphic designs of this with the tail down is probably a wolf design. Once the timber wolf went out of the area, the horse came in, and this became the horse design. When the tail is up, it is known as the dog design. Dogs were used for guarding, they were used for hunting, and they were used for the wool. And they were incorporated into the design in the rim of a Skokomish basket. The body of the basket holds 3 or 4 like motifs. Here we have the box design, which is separated by 5 little fingers. This is known as the hand or finger design. Unfortunately, we do not know who wove this basket. Fortunately, it has come down to us as a prize. This is another Skokomish basket, which is missing a few of the loops. They are very, very fragile, and they have come off. These are hazel or cedar loops. They were put on for decoration because they are so fragile they would not have been meant for anything utilitarian. This design is very distinctive. It is the zigzag. It is probably the salmon gill design. This being the salmon gill, which makes your zigzag or mountain design. Again, we have our rim design of the what? It's the wolf. Down, turn, tail. And she has used the same wolf design as fillers in her mountain design. This was very distinctive, and it meant that a certain weaver wove this basket. but we see a distinctive start on this basket. These are two examples of small Skokomish baskets. These would have been the baskets that were sold to the tourists. The smaller they became, the more portable they became, and they were very easy to pack away, especially this little gem. It is beautifully woven, but look at the rim design. Upturned tail, meaning it's a dog. The yellow in this basket is aniline dyed. Previous to the aniline dye, this yellow would have been either wolf moss or it would have been the Oregon grape. Strong yellows boiled with the material. Beautiful little miniature. Smaller basket, Skokomish basket, upturned tail, again it is a dog. We know that this basket was made in the Skokomish area of Puget Sound because of one diagnostic trait. The rim design of the upturned tail dogs. But it is not a flexible basket. It is a hard basket. It is made of cedar. It is made of cedar, and it is made with aniline dyed bear grass. Look what this woman has done with purple and with green. She has made an eye-dazzling design in her zigzag or mountain design. It is a highly decorative basket. She has left no area undecorated. And you notice as I was turning this basket that some of the dyes have faded, and this is what happens with aniline dyes. If you look real hard at the rim of the basket, this woman has not put loops in, but she has little holes where the rim design meets the body of the basket. These holes were for hide loops to carry the little basket. It is a berry basket, and this would have been carried in front of the body. And then, when it was full of berries, emptied into a larger basket that would have been carried at the back of the person. In the western part of Washington, we have another tribe, a neighbor of the Toana. It is the Quinault. The Quinault were woven with different materials than the Toana. The Toana, as we remembered, used the cedar and the bear grass. The Quinault used the spruce root. They use the spruce root like the Tlinkits. It is a very fragile material. It's a basket you do not flex without getting it wet first. These baskets were made for berry baskets, especially the bigger size. The smaller size was a little tourist basket. We see a little figure along the top with two legs. It's a mythical figure. It's called the Grebe or a hell diver. These little mythical animals would fly over the treetops, and many stories abound with this little animal. The woman has made a signature on this basket. She has not written her name, but she has put in one red Grebe or hell diver. These baskets are from the Chehalis tribe, and the Chehalis, the Toana, and the Quinault were very, very close together, very distinctive, but very close in their ways of weaving. However, there are some very definite differences. Chehalis basketry is low. The forms are low. They do not make tall vertical sides. They make more horizontal banding than the other two tribes that we just spoke of. You see the horizontal fret bands here. They have the same rim band, but here it becomes a divisional band because the same rim band is repeated between the two other bands. Flexible baskets, bear grass and cattail. Another Chehalis basket. The woman has used a little polychrome. She has used a green color on this basket. Chances are it's not from lichens. It is an aniline dye. But look at her background. It is a negative basket. When I say negative, that means she has dyed the complete background gold before she wove her basket. And what are the little figures along the top? They are the hell divers, but they face right instead of the Twana left. It's a very desirable little piece. A low basket, a flexible basket from the Chehalis area. That was the Grays Harbor area of western Washington. The finest Chehalis ever made is this gem right here, a tourist basket. Somewhat reminiscent of the berry basket, but of a smaller version. But let us see what this weaver has done. She has taken 3 different motifs, 2 of which are Euro-American. We have the Roman numerals, we have the St. Anthony cross, combined with her traditional, what is it when the tails are down? The wolf. That is correct. Unbelievably woven, a flexible basket, a delightful Chehalis basket, using many of the diagnostic traits of the other 2 areas. And then the little Chehalis basket in the front, using zoomorphic design. Look real closely at the eyes of the deer. You see a blue eye on the deer. And what's on top of the deer? A little hell diver. The hell divers are riding the deer. This is a very fine Chehalis basket. This could have been a ceremonial basket or a basket to hold someone's tools. It's an elliptical basket. But look what the woman has done in this basket. She has used not only zoomorphic design with the deer, she has used one figure representing her anthropomorphic design, and then her geometric design on the back. We don't know what this basket was used for, but it is a very desirable basket. I have a feeling it was a ceremonial basket.
The Columbia River was long established as a trade route between the coast and the interior before Lewis and Clark made their first explorations of the area between 1805 and 1806. The lower Columbia, that part of the river between the Pacific and the Dalles, was one of the chief trading centers of the pre-contact West. This is where 2 great basket-making traditions come together: the coiled basketry of the Klickitats and the twined basketry of the upper Chinook tribes, the Wasco and the Wishram. The Dalles was the principal fishing site of the interior, and people living in this area of the Columbia River wove twined baskets of native hemp and cattail with overlay material of various grasses. They needed strong, flexible containers to gather, store, and transport fish, roots, and berries.
The most important staple root in this particular area was the bitter root. The Indian name for bitter root meant lives forever. The Wasco Wishram people would have ceremonies when these roots came out in season. They would fill their root bags and many times dig a hole, and include in this hole a bag filled with roots. If a traveler came by, he could always dig up the bag and have something to eat. This ceremony was very important. The Indians felt if they gave roots back to the earth, the next year the roots would again deliver. This particular bag is a geometricized design. It is a very old design pattern. Some believe it to be the salmon gill or fishnet pattern, salmon being the other important staple in this area. It is a beautiful example of a Wasco Sally bag made around the middle of the 19th century. It's a flexible bag and can be folded when not in use. Many of these bags were made, they were traded, they were given away, and when you gave bags like this away, you usually filled them with roots. We have three prime examples of anthropomorphic and zoomorphic Wasco Sally bags. Let us start with this bag. Very unusual thing about this bag. The woman has taken her bird design, or condor, many think this is the condor, or the thunderbird, and she has enclosed little negative birds inside. A very difficult task with what she has done. Coming around the basket, she has her deer and her small deer. Made as a root bag, but a very decorative root bag. This bag was made with a hexagonal face. These are designs that were found on petroglyphs. This is a skeletalized face centered in what is commonly called the fishnet pattern. We date this particular basket mid-19th century. A beautiful artifact made of Indian hemp with hide rim for stability, used to hold roots. But the most collectible example is this little root bag. It could have been a child's root bag. The most prized design on Wasco Sally bags is the full-standing, skeletalized figure. Many feel this design symbolized the ghost cult that the Wasco Rishram people believed in. Some scholars feel that these figures represent ancestors of the Wasco Rishram. Others believe rib placement has something to do with where the bag was woven. If the ribs point up, the bag was made upriver. Down-pointing ribs might mean the bag was made downriver, towards the mouth of the Columbia. Here we have a Wasco flat bag. They not only wove these bags for roots, but they wove them to hold personal possessions. This one is a very early one, I would imagine mid-19th century. Let's follow the figures. What is this bird called? A condor, or an eagle, or a thunderbird? Here we have our deer, our dog design. Fish is the sturgeon, and then our other figures. They are not full standing. To be full standing, it has to take up the complete height of the basket. A very desired artifact from this region. This is a Klickitat basket. Klickitat baskets were made on the eastern side of the Cascade Mountain ranges. These baskets are considered hard baskets. Hard because of the kind of materials that they were woven with. This is a berry basket. This kind of basket would have been brought up to a mountain area, put in the middle of a place where there were berries, and everyone would have had a smaller berry basket, which they would have emptied into a basket like this to be carried down the mountain. Now you would wonder how they would carry berries without spilling them. They would take vines from around the mountain area and they'd connect all the loops so that going back down the mountain, none of the berries would spill out. We're talking about berries like huckleberries, blueberries, things that they used in their everyday diet. What is this basket made of? It is called a cedar basket. A cedar, it is made of cedar root, it is made of cedar bark, and it is made with dyed cedar bark. The black in this basket is cedar root skin that has probably been dyed in an alkaline mud solution. The white is bear grass. The yellow or gold is a dyed bear grass, and the red or reddish brown is probably dyed with alder bark. In the olden days, before dyes came onto the scene, the women would take the alder bark and chew it, and then spit it onto the freshly peeled bark of the cedar. Why she did this? Because as soon as the sap and the saliva got together, it left a mordant that would fulfill the dye onto the bark. Klickitats are very desirable baskets. People in the Northwest love their Klickitats. What you want in a Klickitat is a small base and nice flaring sides, very straight sides with no lump. This weaver did a magnificent job on this basket. There are no lumps. All the loops are there, which you want. These loops were very fragile. And the basket is considered a cone. The loops, by the way, are known as ears by the weavers. So we can say all the ears are in place. These are also Klickitats. Nice small base, nice flaring sides with no lumps, and yes, all the ears are in place. The basket with the zoomorphic design was probably made at a later time. The Euro-Americans loved the zoomorphic designs on their basket. They felt that that was the Indian way. However, it wasn't the Indian way. The Indian way would have been more traditional as the last basket that we saw. A little newer vintage is this basket with the rider and the riderless horses on it. And then we see the flag being held up by one of the men. All made of the same materials with the cedar and the cedar bark. As we said, these are called cedar bark baskets or hard baskets. This basket is a Cowlitz basket. It is also a hard basket. These baskets were made on the western side of the Cascade Mountain Ranges, and these Indians were linguistic cousins to the Klickitats. But you see, this basket does not have the ears of the Klickitat. It does have your hide loop for carrying, and it does have the same type of designs. They borrowed from each other, these designs. This is considered the V, the zigzag, or the mountain range design. And the interior design within the field is sometimes referred to as the quail design. It is made with cedar bark, which has been dyed with the alder bark glaze. The Cowlitz people, especially the lower Cowlitz group, were decimated in the flu epidemic of 1830. And so many of the Cowlitz that we see today were done by one woman who lived to be 115 years old. Her name was Mary Kiona. This basket is considered to be a Mary Kiona basket. And let's look at the walls of this basket and the opening. You see that this does not have the same type of round opening as the Klickitat basket. It is more elliptical. The bottom of the basket is also more ovular or elliptical. And there is something that happens on the bottom of this basket that you do not find on the Klickitat basket. It is called beading. When the woman is putting down her design, she is beading or moving her foundation over the design material. She is not covering it up. And you see there is a row of beading on the bottom of this basket. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Nettie Jackson, a contemporary weaver from the Klickitat area who is very widely respected, not only in the Northwest, but now through most of the area in the United States.
It was a special gift right from the beginning to me and my people. It was my mother's death that brought on this willingness and eagerness to learn this. I've quit it about 1,000 times when I first learned. Like it took me 4 years just to learn to process my own roots, to go up to the mountains, dig them out, and peel them down. Sometimes in one day, what I can get out of the ground will take me maybe a month to process. This is beargrass. All my material contains of is cedar roots and beargrass. They call it beargrass. In our own language, we call it yai. It's a plant that grows up by the huckleberry fields in the higher elevations. It grows wild. Anytime that I can make it up into the mountains, weather permits, I can go up and get it. And what I do is I look for the bear grass that is white, that doesn't have any kind of purple in it, or there's a lot of it, but it will all be purple right in here. I have to find the ones that are green, that will turn white like this. Only thing that I get is commercially is my coloring, and I color them all colors. Some people like pretty baskets, especially Indians, they like pretty colors. So I use pretty colors in their baskets. In this work of basketry that I've learned, in my heart, I've always thanked my Creator for allowing me to be this way, to pick this up in the time and age that it was being lost. And I appreciate different people coming and being interested in helping me preserve it. I'm thankful for that, you know, and I'm thankful for the many friends that I've met through my work. It's a work that isolates me a lot of times in my home. If I want to get something done, really, I have to stay and sit by myself all the time. I have to be isolated to get my work done. But I'm really grateful that I've learned to do this, and it's taken me a long ways, and it's helped. I feel that it's helped me and my people both to explain to the outside world what we're about.
My grandma always put mistakes in her work. Her work looked so perfect. And I asked my grandma, how come you put a mistake in your work? You've been weaving for over 90 years and you put mistakes in your work? And she told me, it's to remind ourselves that it takes a lot of mistakes to become perfect. And you always put a mistake in your work. That mistake is your doorway or your window for your spirit to flow through your basket, that you never capture or imprison your soul in your basket, that you should have a mistake there so your soul can flow in and out of the basket. And the other reason my grandmother gave me was that if someone comes up to you and tells you that they are perfect, you know they made more mistakes than you did.